Die My Love is the latest film from legendary filmmaker Lynne Ramsay, and it is a weird one.
I'm stuck between wanting to do something and not wanting to do anything at all.
Lynne Ramsay has been a legend for a long time already. Her latest film is Die My Love. She has been in the game for 30 years or so. She won an award at Cannes while she was still in film school, not a terrible start. And of course, in more recent years, she's made movies like You Were Never Really Here and We Need to Talk About Kevin. Die My Love follows a couple played by Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson who flee to the countryside chasing this romanticized notion of art and a simpler life. But instead of that kind of idyllic escape, the dream quickly turns into a feeling of tremendous confinement. We have new motherhood and creative paralysis and very intrusive thoughts that pull Jennifer Lawrence's character into this cycle of hope and collapse. The film is an adaptation of a novel of the same name, at least the English translation of the novel, and it had an interesting path to the screen. Believe it or not, Martin Scorsese read the book in a book club and immediately thought that it would make a great feature film. He reached out to Jennifer Lawrence and her production company with the idea that Jennifer could be a good lead. And then Jennifer, in turn, reached out to Lynne Ramsay, and Ramsay didn't get back to her right away, but ultimately they did decide to work together, and Jennifer Lawrence has kind of cited Lynne Ramsay as being one of her favorite all-time directors, so this was a particularly meaningful collaboration. The movie was shot around Calgary, where I'm from, so it was very cool to see some distinctly Alberta highways, feeling very much like home on the film, and it was shot on film, shot on 35mm specifically, and perhaps most interestingly on Ektachrome stock, which is a very distinctive look. It doesn't necessarily look like quote-unquote real. It's not something that you would use for a super grounded, realistic film, but it ends up working really well as kind of an embodiment of Jennifer Lawrence's perspective. In order to make the stock work, the production needed to pump in a lot of light into the set. It doesn't have the most dynamic range, and so we lose some details in the windows, for example. This is something that happened in Begonia as well, the film that I reviewed recently too, which you can check out right there. But basically it works really effectively, something that we normally wouldn't really go for. Something that you were taught to avoid is blowing out these highlights, but it works in this setting. Again, if we view the film largely as a representation of this internal psyche, this loss of highlight, loss of detail in the brightest parts of the image just reinforces the destruction or the breakdown of Jennifer Lawrence's psyche. The film was also framed interestingly in a 1:3:3 aspect ratio, which is very boxy, almost a square, and that shape really works here. It's kind of like the outline of a house, like at least the houses that I would draw as a kid before adding on the roof, and it reflects that sort of confinement that the characters are feeling in this home. What was supposed to be an escape, a chance for absolute freedom and endless possibility, instead becomes a tool of confinement. And they actually shot the film in a real house not far from Calgary. Like, production design did make some changes, but the base of the house is a very real house not too far from me, so very cool. The cinematography leans pretty heavily on handheld work, which makes a lot of sense. The film is pretty consistently uneasy and shaky and unbalanced, and the camera reflects that again, kind of as a manifestation, a physical manifestation of this psychological turmoil. But in contrast to those kind of jerky handheld movements. There are some moments of very tremendous stillness and absolute silence with some gorgeous locked off shots. Again, it's a really perfect example of why filmmakers should be more comfortable just locking a camera on a tripod sometimes and letting the scene kind of breathe, letting the characters and the setting tell the story without forcing unnecessary movement. The camera doesn't always need to be moving. There needs to be purpose, and Die My Love finds that very beautiful balance. There's that frenetic energy sometimes, and the camera matches that, and then there's also calm, and the camera embodies that as well. Something else that is really cool here are the lenses that are being used. For a lot of the shoot, they use P Vintage Prime lenses, super nice lenses, but they also shot with a couple of what are called Petzval lenses. And there's a lot of history to these lenses. They've been recreated by different manufacturers, but at the end of the day, what separates them or what makes them unique is this very swirly bokeh around the edges of the frame. It's almost like a whirlpool of light and color, and it's very, very distinct. And we can see it in scenes in Die My Love specifically, in which Jennifer Lawrence's character is kind of in her own head. It is not necessarily real. Not everything that we're seeing is a true depiction of reality. And on that note, Lynne Ramsay just in general tends to prioritize visuals. And that's not to say that she doesn't have strong dialogue or that the dialogue is poor. That's not the case, but the visuals do really carry a tremendous amount of the weight, and they serve as a tool to develop the internal workings of our characters. The visuals allow us to understand the characters on a deeper level. There are so many shots that I could talk about specifically, but I'm absolutely head over heels in love with one of the simplest shots of the film, the opening shot with a locked-off tripod as Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson enter their new countryside house for the first time and kind of drift in and out of frame, and we hear their conversations that are happening sometimes off frame. We see some trepidation, but we also see their passion and their love for each other, and such a beautiful and effective way to allow us to sit in on a very intimate series of moments. And of course, that initial stillness is later contrasted with some truly, I would say, grand visuals in the final act in particular. There is the use of fire, of flames just absolutely engulfing the frame. There are also a number of pretty gorgeous shots in the tall Alberta grass that is often enhanced by the Petzval lenses with the swirly bokeh around the edges of the frame. Something else that I really love about Ramsay is how she portrays the human body. It's often difficult to pinpoint with any sort of precise language what it's like when a film is directed normally by a man with the camera acting kind of as an extension of the male gaze compared to something like this. Ramsay shows human bodies as they are. She acknowledges that the human body can be sexy, but that it also has other utility and that our bodies are not always aesthetically perfect. The body can be an element of desire, but that desire is not always at the forefront. And sometimes that desire is lost, and that's something that Ramsay explores pretty explicitly in the film. Like I mentioned, these two characters move to the countryside with romantic ideas of the future. They believe that their dreams are going to come true. Jennifer Lawrence's character is going to write, Robert Pattinson's character is going to make music, but these hopes and these dreams kind of shatter, and that cycle becomes very crucial to the film. There's hope, there's a breakdown, there's hope, there's a breakdown. In the final act, it feels like the film might end on several occasions, and I think people might be put off by that, kind of thinking that a resolution is coming and then something veers or goes in a different direction. But again, that just is getting back to the kind of cyclical nature of the internal psyche of our protagonist. These highs and lows are amplified even more by the music, both the sound design and the score. It's like absolutely perfect, some of the best sound of the year. You have moments of like intense anger and thrashing and metal contrasted with quick cuts to silence and internal thoughts and nature. And again, these cuts can be quite extreme at times, a little bit jarring, but it's all intentional. It's all with purpose. And that's a testament to Ramsay, obviously, but also to the sound designer, Paul Davies, and the composer, Johnny Greenwood. The music and the sound design essentially help reveal the psychology of our protagonist and reflect these intrusive thoughts that come and go very quickly and are constantly shifting and changing. And from the soundtrack perspective, the film features one song in particular in a very central role. John Prine's song with Iris DeMent, In Spite of Ourselves. It's a song that I absolutely love and just kind of coincidentally was talking to my partner about not long before we saw this film, and it ended up being very crucial to the movie, and I'm so happy. From a thematic perspective, Ramsay explores a lot of very interesting ideas, a lot of intimate ideas. There's obviously at the forefront this experience of motherhood and the toll that it can take on someone emotionally, physically, and psychologically. And there's, of course, a literal depiction of postpartum psychosis, but in very classic Ramsay fashion, she never wants to over-explain anything, and there's always multiple interpretations, and that's okay. One of those interpretations that speaks to me personally is this exploration of the death of the artist and the death of a dream. These two characters moved with the romantic notion that they would create art, but reality sets in and neither of them did what they hoped to do. They look at their lives and it's not what they dreamed of. They had pinned so much of their identity on creating this art that when there's a lack of creation or a death of creation, it essentially symbolizes their own death, the death of the person they thought they would be. Ultimately, both performances are very strong. There's a ton of weight placed on Jennifer Lawrence, particularly when it comes to very physical acting, and she puts herself in some very difficult situations and definitely delivers. Pattinson's character, by contrast, is a bit more grounded. He's got a pretty good American accent, I will say, that has gotten a lot better over the years, and he strikes a very delicate balance between empathy and anger and concern and disregard. It's a very, very human performance in a film that is weird. It is a Lynne Ramsay film, and it's not necessarily going to be for everyone. If you're looking for super tidy, clear explanations with everything tied up in a very tight bow, you might not love this one. But if you are open to films that use unique visual language and are open to multiple kind of interpretations, then it's definitely worth a watch. Thank you so much for watching. Watch the next video and the next one and the next one too, and like, comment, subscribe, hype it up if you're watching on a mobile device. Yeah, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.